I'm either like, boom, I'm so productive. I'm so on top of my recovery. I got my food set. I moved my body today. And then another day when your capacity is lower, it's like, forget it. It all goes to the wind. So that's how we can avoid the boom or bust cycle. Hi, everyone. Ariana here, and I'm here with Abby. Thanks for joining me, Abby. We are here.
Thanks for having me.
We're going to have a conversation today about neurodivergent eating, about structuring recovery for your unique brain, for accepting yourself, and we're just going to talk back and forth. And for those that don't know me, I am an advocate in the food addiction recovery program that we call the Addiction Reset Community. And Abby is a trainee with the FARA training program. So thanks, Abby, again. So what I want to talk about is structuring recovery. What does that mean? That could mean pacing, but it could mean, how do you make recovery a part of your life? How do we make it a regular part of our life that is realistic, that is accessible, that is sustainable? One of the things that Abby and I were talking about recently that was on my mind was the idea of fluctuating capacity. So all of us have this. All that means is that one day I might be really high energy and be able to be really focused at work or with my family, on any tasks I want to do. And the next day, something might happen, or I might be overwhelmed or feeling a little burned out temporarily, and I'm not able to get as much done. So, what can I do to put things in place with my recovery around food to make it a little easier for myself on those days where I don't have as much to give? When I'm having one of those up days where I'm feeling extra energetic, I think to myself, what is a gift I can give future me? Is it doing these dishes? Is it batch cooking? So, Abby, what do you think about this? What are some of your thoughts around the idea of fluctuating capacity and how to structure your recovery?
Yeah. Well, when I heard you say, or I think I read that you said you think about it in terms of giving your future self a gift, I felt like that cracked open a little part of my brain. I had never really thought of it that way. And sometimes in the moment when I'm thinking, oh, I really should batch cook, or I really should meal plan, or go grocery shopping, or do dishes, or whatever the things are that I really should be accomplishing for my recovery or for just life. Sometimes I don't want to do them. And being able to kind of reframe them in that sense of oh, well, I actually have energy right now. And my future self would really appreciate it if I gave myself this gift of doing this now instead of saving it for later when I might want to do it even less. I don't know. It just really helps me look at it in a different way. And I think the other thing that comes up for me around this is normalizing fluctuating capacity. It's not that there's something wrong with me, that some days I can do a million things and other days I can barely do two things. Just normalizing that that's totally okay. It's not a problem. It maybe means that we need to, like you said, structure things differently, or, keep that in mind so that we can function how we want to function. But just this idea that it doesn't need to be a shaming situation where there's something wrong with me because I have this fluctuating capacity.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that is a big part of that, of just our self-acceptance. If you're a person who is highly sensitive, if you seem like this resonates with you, that you don't have consistency in terms of what you can output, or if you're someone who's neurodivergent, right? Our brains are dynamic. It's a lot of sensory input going in and coming out every day. So the level of support that we need day to day is going to change, and that's okay. That is something that we can give ourselves love and grace around. And also, I totally hear you. When you have free moment, you don't necessarily want to be doing things like more work or more tasks. But that's a practice. So that is a practice for me. It's not something that's going to become automatic either. It's almost like I've just learned to try things out. Like, let me just try it. Maybe that will feel like I'm, white knuckling it this time, but then when I wait, like the dishes are a good example. At the end of the day, I have much less capacity than in the mornings. So but if I think to myself, well, what would it feel like to wake up tomorrow and walk in this kitchen and it be like clean? It's like, that would feel like a gift. So can I do that? Right. And I do that without putting pressure on myself. Like if I'm getting stressed, like while I'm doing it, then I can stop, because it's really important that we become more aware of what's happening in our nervous system, in our body. And you also mentioned one thing, which made me think about task avoidance, or like the task initiation can be really hard for a lot of us. And there's different things that we can do to try to help ourselves. I heard one expert recently talk about it as tricking your brain into doing something you don't want to do. And I thought, but okay, sometimes that is the case, but other times it is. I like the gift reframe, because it's like I'm helping myself. I'm creating supports for myself because I'm independent. This is my situation. I don't have a lot of people to rely on, so it's empowering. It can be empowering. And it's okay to reach out and ask for help too. So, like, if you find that you can't, one thing that comes to mind is like, okay, well, if I'm constantly balancing all this and I know this is my capacity, never goes beyond a certain point, maybe that's the time to like outsource one of those things, to ask for help, to, be open to different solutions. But I think you're absolutely right that none of these supports or accommodations we make for ourselves are going to help unless we accept and normalize that there's absolutely nothing wrong with you for being different day to day. Some days it might feel like an accomplishment to take a shower. And another day, I might do like more work than I've done, like I might get the hyper focus is like, I'm going to ride that wave when I can. Because you know what it made me think of? I'm sorry. I just want to say one thing is that the boom or bust cycle, getting out of that, that's kind of what we're talking about. So by giving yourself gifts for future you get out of that cycle of, I'm either like, boom, I'm so productive. I'm so on top of my recovery. I got my food set. I moved my body today. And then another day when your capacity is lower, it's like, forget it. It all goes to the wind. So that's how we can avoid that cycle. Does that resonate with you, Abby? Do you have any thoughts about the boom or bust?
Yeah, I haven't heard that like term specifically, but I can very much relate to that as an experience. And I think the thing that's coming up for me around this, from what you're saying, is like when I am in that boom, I don't know if that's like a good term or whatever. Like when I do have capacity, when I have energy, when I feel like some days I feel like I can get 40 hours of work done in 4 hours, to like use that and do the dishes and do the meal prepping and do the freezer meals, so that when inevitably that energy drops off and I don't want to do any of that stuff, that I have those gifts prepared. So it's just kind of the same thing that you said, I think, but just this idea of like, accepting both the lull and the peak in terms of energy. Like, it's great. I'm going to use this while I have it. And it's totally okay that it drops off. The other thing that you mentioned a little bit back was like the whole task initiation piece, and how that can be very difficult and can lead to like task avoidance. And you kind of mentioned the thing about tricking your brain, and how that, like, I always felt like that felt a little like mean to yourself.
Mhm.
like, oh, I'm going to trick my brain so I can do this thing that I don't want to do. But so anyways, related to that, one thing that I like to do, which feels similar but more compassionate, is like, all I have to do is start. All I have to do is start the dishes. I have enough capacity and enough like energy to start. I don't have to finish them. I don't have to do them all. And I absolutely am allowed to stop if I want to stop, but I am willing to start. And I often find that once I start, like it's not so painful and so white knuckly as I thought that it was going to be. And I am able to finish the thing. But I think of it a little bit differently than tricking, because I feel like it's giving myself grace. If I end up not having the capacity to do what I wanted to start, then I get to stop. So I think that's kind of one way that I trick myself without actually tricking myself in a much more compassionate way. So
Yeah, I totally hear you. I think about that same idea, like sometimes after a long work day, I don't I don't feel like I want to start cooking dinner for my family, you know? And so
and
I
they want to
think
eat every single day, so many times a day. They just always want to eat. It's wild.
I know. Why? It never ends, right? Um, but like the dishes example is I might use a time chunk, let's say, like, okay, just do
Yeah.
it for 2 minutes and then you can stop if you want, like 1 minute. And like you
Yep.
said, like the way the brain works is that it's the initiation of the task that is the barrier. And once you kinda go over that hump, it's like seems smoother. But when I think about, like, that dinner struggle, it's not quite the same, right? Because it's like, well, I can't actually just stop,
Yes.
right? So
Yeah.
one thing I will do is chunk it as like, "All right, it's 4 o'clock. This is the time we eat. This is the time I should start." So instead, what I do is say, well, what could I just do now to get over with? Like, I will just start prepping something, or I'll even put in the morning, like, the morning is when my capacity is the largest, always. That's consistent for me. So sometimes if I have a few extra minutes, I will even, like, pull out the pan that I'll need later for dinner. I'll pull out the ingredients if they're not from the fridge. Like, I will, like, have the utensils ready to go because it also is a cue to my brain when I get home. "Oh, yeah, remember? You're gonna do that." So, like, that is also a little bit of a gift because it's not necessarily a gift, it's like a helping hand to future me that has less capacity.
Totally.
That kinda rhymed, so maybe I need to put that on a sticker or something. Um, but yeah, that's the other thing I that you said that I thought about is, it's I'm somebody that thrives on routine and structure. That said, my capacity is fluid and it does shift and life happens and unexpected things happen, or you just predict wrong. That happened to me yesterday. I thought a certain activity would not be stressful. It ended up being stressful, right? So I ended up with less capacity than I expected. That is when, like, that meal or 2 that I put in the freezer that maybe has been sitting there for a long time and I didn't necessarily have a plan for, is like, that's the moment, that you can take that out. Yeah, and another idea is to, like, gamify it just to make it interesting
Mhm.
somehow, just to make it more engaging. So, it could be like listening to music, is what, even just to do a task, or sometimes, I've been known to call friends while decluttering or cleaning, like, like, I want something to activate that part of my brain so that I'm not focusing too much on a task, and all those things help my recovery, but I wanna go back to what you said that was so smart, which is, let's normalize this. Let's normalize that it's not gonna look the same from day to day and that we can be flexible with our routines. when it suits our wellness, like when it suits our, like our well-being.
Totally. The other thing that came up when you were just talking was like, as we're planning for this fluctuating capacity, like it's okay to have multiple routines where like one routine is like bare minimum. Like this is what has to happen even if it's like my lowest energy day. Like my children need to get a protein and a fruit and a vegetable. Does it need to be like 100% perfect and a gourmet meat? Like no, it doesn't. It can be like a raw veggie if like so having like, I don't know if the word like lowering expectations is the right thing, but just having like bare minimum, like this is what has to get done. And then these other things really support me and are great and are amazing. But I don't have to do them on the days when I really just can't get those done. So that's something that I've done, is where I have like two different like routines or two different sets of activities that happen in a day, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. I think that you actually gave me a really great idea with that, is that what I would think of it as almost like a tiered approach for your routines, like you said, bare
Totally.
minimum, like the children must be fed, you know? It doesn't
Yes.
need to be their favorite meal. It doesn't need to be elaborate in any way. It's like you have a certain
Yes.
requirement. And then maybe there's one above that, and it's like a go-to weeknight meal when you're like kind of like at your average, like typical
Yeah.
capacity. And then there's those days where I'm like, I'm a shooting star. I'm going to try a new recipe, or I'm going to like, do the thing that's like more laborious or something like that, or that they get really excited about. And then you can do that. And we can't predict always, like when that's going to happen. And I think that that's where the flexibility comes from.
Totally.
Because in the past, before I found recovery, anytime I would have a fluctuation, I would judge myself. Like, what's wrong with you? Why can't you get up for your routine today? Why didn't you do it? You had a longer to-do list than this. Like, um, so yeah, a lot of that is self-acceptance. The other thing I thought about was how important it is to consider, like, the parts of our recovery that in the addiction reset community we talk about as the 80%.
Mm.
So, oh, it looks like there's a comment. Sorry, I didn't see a comment. Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah, no, I just want to uplift this comment. Yeah, so I'm just going to read it out loud for those that might not be able to read on screen. A user has commented that, so glad to hear there are more people who struggle with doing the dishes. I can start, but struggle with the finishing. I'm pushing with spring cleaning to get my kitchen clean and organized. Clearing space can give me room to breathe. I don't have kids, but you had some life things that made you fall behind. So you want the decluttered mind, and you're more motivated with your space. Yeah, it sounds like you have a lot of compassion. That's amazing. You're giving yourself a lot of compassion. Um, and I love that. And I'm right with you. Like it's the cleaning issue is one of those things where it's like, I know I'm going to feel better. This is going to make me feel better if I do this. I'm feeling that right now. My house is not where I want it to be right now. And every day I'm having to say to myself, well, keep in mind, you've been working a lot of extra hours and you've had this stressor and this stressor. And it's like, it's okay. My house doesn't have to look or be a certain way for things to be okay. I do what I can, and some things are the tools that we start to try are going to help, like playing music while cleaning is one thing. Are there other things that help you with this particular topic, Abby? Like just with tasks that maybe feel like adulting, or, like, as just someone who runs a household, or just even it could be hygiene, it could be anything.
Yeah, I do think it's especially hard with these cleaning type things that like are ongoing. It's not like a one and done type of a thing. It's like it just
Mhm.
has to keep going every day. Those children getting fed, ourselves getting fed. So other things, I really like the idea of like having something, I think that's called like temptation bundling, maybe, where you get to listen to your favorite album or watch like the Eras tour now that it's out on Disney. This is not a plug for that. Or like listening to a podcast or something, like something that you enjoy while doing something that you don't enjoy. That can be a way to kind of like get that initiated. Or like you mentioned, gamifying. So once I finish the dishes, I get to go do this thing that I want to do. So like rewarding yourself, obviously picking rewards that, you know, are not processed food related or, going to be triggering in other ways is important.
Right.
But if there's like a show that you really like to watch or whatever, that can be a way to kind of get to that completion stage.
Yeah. Yeah, I use that a lot. I pretty much use that on a daily basis, and it could be even really small things. Like I wouldn't give myself the incentive of like listening to music. I would never withhold music from myself. I
I
listen
mean,
to
me neither. That's not one that I would use probably, but
Oh, I'm just teasing, but but like the giving yourself a small incentive. Like the other task that I always have to do every night is make my children's lunches. I have 3 children. I gotta do that each night. And I'll tell myself like, if like, oh, I don't want to. I want to call a friend, like for example. And it's like, okay, when you do the lunches, I tell myself, then you'll be done and you'll be able to relax into this phone call to your friend. You know? Um, Thank you. Thanks, Dr. Joan. We we haven't talked so much about this, but I do want to mention this. So thank you, Joan, for mentioning this, that all these things that we're talking about, all these techniques, for me, none of these strategies worked when I was eating a lot of processed food. Like, I was not able to break it down in this way. I was not able to talk to myself in a positive voice. I was not able to structure any sort of day. I had no idea what the next day would bring. And it was like felt like survival. It felt like treading water. Every day, every single task felt, I don't know about you, Abby, but like when I was in the processed food, every single day felt hard. Every task felt like white knuckling. I ended up in tears probably every day, because if you're a neurodivergent person and you have executive functioning, struggles, like differences in your brain, eating processed foods are going to make those, they're going to amp those up. They're going to amp them up so much that, like, I mean, I say this a lot recently, but I literally couldn't read a book. I could not read. And that's already something that neurodivergent people struggle with. Like, someone with ADHD, for example, might need to reread a paragraph, like they can't process things, or, they can process with vision better over auditory or reading. Well, when you're eating processed foods, I feel like there's not a lot of processing happening. Like, what is going in there? What's
turned
getting in?
off.
Yeah, yeah,
Totally.
yeah. And the other thing I was thought we could just touch upon, because I think it's related to fluctuating capacity, is just what I would call sensory safety. So we have sensory issues. We're highly sensitive people. We might be more sensitive to our environment than the people around us. And it's important to get to know those differences and accept them. And I want to normalize them too, to use your word, Abby, because when we honor those needs, it reduces stress. And when our brains are not stressed, they're not going to be in the cravings for processed food, right? When our brains are stressed, we're going to feel stronger cravings. So I wonder, Abby, do you have any, how do you create like safety around your sensory issues in your environment, if you'd like to share?
Yeah. Well, two come up for me right off the bat. A couple years back, my kids started doing like sports, where we would go to tournaments and we would go to these things. And I had a couple experiences where I would walk into these gymnasiums and the people and the food and the sound and just like, and I'm worried about my kids doing what, like all the things, right? And I was like, it was really difficult. And my family members like they were not having the same experience as me. And so they had a very hard time like supporting me. Anyways, what I finally decided to do was get some little inconspicuous, is that the word? Not ear, like it doesn't completely eliminate sound. It just like turns down the volume. And it was a complete game changer for me. I can still hear what I need to hear. It's just like a bit of a breath. So that was a huge game changer. And now it's funny because now I always take them with me, and just knowing that I have them, if I need them, I oftentimes don't even need them, which is a funny thing about brains. The other thing is related to what we were talking about before is preparing meals. Preparing meals for me I don't know if it's the stimulation or exactly what it is, but it's very stressful for me. And I always felt like I should let my children help me, because I should teach them skills, blah, blah, blah. But sometimes I cannot tolerate that. And it just ends up with me being overstimulated and yelling at people. And that's not what I want. And so I have given myself permission to, on days when I don't have the capacity to be teaching my children things while I'm preparing dinner. I ask them to leave the kitchen and go find something to do. I will let you know when dinner's ready. And so those are two examples that came up as you were talking.
Yeah, I can relate to both of those. I'm just kind of chuckling in my mind because I've literally burned things because of children interrupting my flow when like making dinner. And I'm totally with you. And I appreciate you saying that because I have judged myself about that. Like, oh, but when they were toddlers, remember when life was slower, I could do these things. Why can't I do it now? And you're right. It's just a matter of like, that is one thing you can do. It's like, I know I have less capacity today, so I need to put my energy into here. My kids know when I'm making lunches, it's after 8 p.m. I can't even see a person. Like I don't even want to, I love you, but I can't even see you because otherwise something is going to go awry here. So that's a great thing to bring up. And as far as the headphones, the earplugs, I don't know if they're the ones someone asked which ones they were. I have recently gotten loop earplugs,
Loop, that's what it was. I was actually just going to look it up, but that is what it was. Yep.
Yeah, they make different ones, and they make ones that are like for social interaction, so you can still hear voices. So I used to teach about sound, and what they basically are doing is just muting. They're turning down the volume on certain frequencies. So those higher frequencies that are like all that crowd, and so the human voice is in the mid range. So that's how that's how they're designed. Little nerding, little former special interest throwing out there.
Love it.
But I actually go everywhere with my enclosed headphones. I take them wherever I go, and I've just let go of the fear of being judged. I cannot go to a grocery store or like a big box store without them. And I honestly, like, there's this one particular big box store that has really large, heavy carts. And I'll tell you, this is how I gamify it, y'all. And I'm going to end with this as a fun tip. I have my music playing. I got my enclosed headphones. I've got my list. So there's a few reasons why to do it that way, right? I stay focused because if it's not on the list, it doesn't exist, for one thing. I say that a lot. And because I don't want to be distracted by any processed food cues. And so I time myself. I'm like, all right, stopwatch, go as fast as I can. And I have been known, yes, I am a grown adult, but I have been known to ride the cart like a child, like push off like it's a skateboard. People look at me, they laugh, they smile. I'm like, I stopped thinking like, oh, they're judging me, and started thinking like, I bet they wish they were that playful at times, like maybe they wish they could do that, and it's like I'm having fun. It reduces my stress. But
You're
that we
accomplishing
can't,
your thing that you need to get
yeah,
done.
yeah, but we can't do that without accepting our differences and celebrating that. So I really appreciate you talking about this topic today, Abby. And for those that might want to get into all these techniques more and to continue, I will be teaching a course starting on April 3rd called Neurodivergent Eating, Mastering Food Management for Highly Sensitive People. So I hope to see a lot of you there so that we can get into the weeds a little bit about how to help ourselves in recovery from processed food. Thank you again, Abby. Any last words that you wanted to share with the world out there?
I think you got it all. I'm really excited for the course as well. So looking forward to it.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. And we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.